Hi, I'm Edwin Samuelson, and welcome to the CineFile. Let's start out with the actual, one of the first two New York film directors. Well, he was the one of the, I gotta give John Cassavetes was the, I think, is the real New York film director.
No, but see, the thing is, Cassavetes started it, but then he made like a lot of his films in Los Angeles.
Well, let's just say this. He is probably the premier film director of New York today, and probably is the best known and will probably be known forever as the premier New York film director. And who is that person? Please, can anybody guess?
Larry Cohen.
Woody
Larry
Allen.
Cohen? No?
Spike Lee.
Woody Allen.
Well, he's Brooklyn. I'm going to say Martin Scorsese.
That's right.
And this show, we're going to be the first of a two-parter. As everyone knows, Martin Scorsese was a connoisseur of film at a young age in Little Italy and saw just about everything. And his love of film translated into directing, and started out at NYU and was teaching and making little short films, and finally got to make his first film, which was Who's That Knocking at My Door, which he starred his, I guess you could say, a favorite of Scorsese's, Harvey Keitel.
Funny little story.
Funny story, yes. Scorsese placed an ad, and Harvey Keitel was a actual court stenographer.
And he was getting mad at Scorsese because he had work to do, and he was missing a lot of work. And he said, look, I got a real job. I can't afford to do this acting all the time. I have to make some money. And I just think that's ironic that if Scorsese didn't follow through with that, Harvey Keitel would have been our still a court stenographer.
What's so funny too is that Scorsese even said that they're from completely different worlds. Like Harvey Keitel is a Polish Jew from Brooklyn, and he's an Italian Catholic from Little Italy. But he said that they had so much in common that they felt like they were in the same world. And they're both I think that their partnership is just as important as the De Niro partnership, which we'll get into later. I think Harvey Keitel added a lot to his filmmaking.
But wait, Keitel wanted to be an actor.
Yes, he did.
I mean,
yes, he did.
The Actors Studio and all that stuff.
Yes, I mean, but he was older when he started. You know, he was older. You know, when because he was over 30 when he first started on Who's That Knocking at My Door.
And that film brought attention to Roger Corman, who has brought up. Let's put it this way: Roger Corman is the godfather of bringing filmmakers that we know and love today into the forefront. And he's shepherded so many filmmakers, including Martin Scorsese, and that brought us up to a film that you like, Boxcar Bertha.
The film is Boxcar Bertha. It was actually not made for Roger Corman Studios. It was actually made for American International Pictures, but produced by Corman. And it's a film with Barbara Hershey
yeah.
and David Carradine. And it's a rip-off of, I guess you could say, Bonnie and Clyde, with Bernie. And oh, I also forgot Bernie Casey, the terrific Bernie Casey, the blaxploitation hero. The film is very notable too for introducing Martin Scorsese to the book *The Last Temptation of Christ* by Barbara Hershey on the set of the film, and actually one of the scenes that's in the book.
The book was not by Barbara Hershey.
No, but she gave him a copy of the book.
Right, yeah.
She gave him a copy of the book on the set, and he read it, and he became obsessed with later on making this a film for years. But interestingly, in the book, there was a scene which he would later use in *Last Temptation of Christ* that he used in *Boxcar Bertha*.
The two notable, I know it's a film that you like, but the two notable things about Boxcar Bertha: one, it's basically about like the first organizing of unions. It talks a lot about like unions and strikes and stuff like that. It's Depression era.
It's on the railroad. That's why it's called Boxcar Bertha, of course. It's a true story, supposedly. However, you know, all these stories they say is true are probably fictionalized, you know, to the extreme. It's got two terrific, not two terrific performances across the board. I think David Carradine is awesome. I think Barbara Hershey is great, and I think it's got a very interesting themes to it because. Number one is it's an exploitation film, but two, it's also an art film. It's
exploitation because Barbara Hershey's very naked in this film.
Yes,
and one of the best parts of the film.
That's the other notable thing I was going to bring up is you've got to watch for the Barbara Hershey scenes, and it's not like the entity either. It's not like those fake plastic boobs that get poked. I mean, we're talking real live flesh Barbara Hershey in the back of a railroad car. Get better,
Mike, leave some to the imagination for our viewers here. But Eric, what do you think of Boxcar Bertha?
I haven't seen it in such a long time. I couldn't honestly give you decent analysis.
And that's why we're different.
Because tell you honestly, I remember like during that period of time, it's like there were like a bunch of these films that came out. Like what was that one, Big Bad Mama?
Big Bad Mama with Andy Dickinson.
Right, and
Jonathan
there's like a bunch of those films that came out the same
Steve Carver,
time that were
actually.
just kind of like this Bonnie and Clyde, people on the run, Depression era kind of thing. And that's basically all I have to say about that.
Well, interestingly, I mean, not Bonnie and Clyde. Well, Bonnie and Clyde, of course, played a big part in the making of that film. But after the film was made, Martin Scorsese got really screamed at by one of his mentors, which was John Cassavetes, saying, "You're wasting your talent by making this crap. Go make a real movie." And he decided then to make a movie with, I guess you could say his writing partner, I cannot think of his name, but it was a writer, the Iranian writer, Mardik Martin. They decided to write together Mean Streets, which was picked up by Warner Brothers on the, I guess you could say, on the strength of
Boxcar
Bertha, so that he could actually direct the film.
Wait, hold on. We're going to reel this in a little bit. Jeff, did you have anything to say about Boxcar Bertha?
I think you guys pretty much covered everything about it. It's not one of my favorites, but it's early Scorsese, so I can't totally say
All right,
it was
I'm going to take
horrible.
I'm going to steal a little thunder over here, Edwin, because I want to talk about Mean Streets because it probably is my favorite Scorsese.
Well, let me say one thing before you do that. I want to say the one thing that's interesting about Boxcar Bertha, my last word on this, is it's great to see a exploitation film, a Roger Corman production directed by a A-list director like Martin Scorsese, and that is the most interesting part, and that's the reason I recommend everyone go see it. Now, on to Mean Streets.
But you could say that about James Cameron and Piranha. That was exploitation too.
Piranha 2.
Or
The
Piranha.
Spawn is
Piranha 2.
Exactly.
Don't forget, Piranha 1 is Joe Dante, and that's a classic.
Mean Streets is fantastic. It was funny because Roger Corman was going to give Scorsese the money to produce this, but he didn't want it to take place in Little Italy with Italian guys. He wanted it to take place in Harlem with an all-black cast. And Scorsese says, "That's not my personal vision. I can't do that." And Corman actually turned him down and said, "I can't help you. I can't produce this for you then. I can't give you the money." So Scorsese found the money on his own. And anybody that's a fan of Cassavetes' work, you look at Mean Streets and you can clearly see the influence. Mean Streets is wonderful because it's one random scene after another. There's a slight story that holds everything together with some characters, with Harvey Keitel's main character and his Robert De Niro's sidekick. But it's the most random scenes put together. I think that makes it wonderful.
It also had started where, in films where they superimpose a person's name right after their character does something that defines them, it started that. But also, I think Mean Streets has one of the best openings of any film I've ever seen, where you're seeing all this old home video footage of all the characters, well, mostly Harvey Keitel, but them growing up in the neighborhood with Be My Baby playing on the soundtrack, which to me matched perfectly with, the footage that you're seeing. So.
And you bring that up, and I'm going to say that it's one of the earliest films where not only Scorsese utilizes music so well in a film,
damn, that's what I was going to say.
but it's one of the best films at utilizing music, just period, early on. I mean, his whole thing with, I think it's the Shirelles, Hey, Mr. Postman.
Oh, yes, and
the fight scene in the pool hall from beginning to end is one of my all-time favorite scenes of all time. I mean, and it's done all with handheld cameras. That's what's fantastic about it. I mean, just De Niro on top of the pool table kicking at the guys. And that's wonderful. And then it's got another nice scene later on in the film with Harvey Keitel drunk in I'm sorry, that's more at the beginning with Harvey Keitel drunk at the bar and they play the Stones. You got to tell me you're coming back for me.
What about you, Eric? I want to hear what you think.
I love this film. It's a great film. I think it's fascinating watching it now. I have to rewatch it, but the whole film was shot in the area now known as Nolita.
You know, it's so funny. Half of it was shot in New York, half was shot in L.A. in the studio.
All the indoor stuff, like
well,
at the hotel.
There's the one thing. I mean, we keep talking about little anecdotes about what happened here, but the one thing that sticks in my mind is the scene he shot with Harvey Keitel's girlfriend having the epileptic fit, and Robert De Niro just runs off. And it's supposed to be late at night, and he's screaming for help, and all these people are running out, and this old lady comes out to help him, and it turned out that was Martin Scorsese's mother playing that part, and they shot that like at 3 in the morning, and the entire building were screaming at them to shut up and get out of there, but he just wouldn't leave.
And Martin Scorsese put himself in the film as the hitman.
The reason I like this film, and I'm going to go on record right now, is that Scorsese is known as being a gangster film director. I mean, you gotta face it. I mean, he's best known for, I mean, his films, the most famous of his films are his gangster films. However, this to me is my favorite of his, I guess you could say, his gangster trilogy.
But I don't know, but they're not really gangsters. They're small-time hoods.
Really.
Yeah, they're more like small-time hoods.
I'll say crime. I'll say crime.
No, it's more New York.
Low lifes.
It's a New York.
Low lifes. Can you agree?
It is a New York.
I want to say it's low life. It's more about a community. It's like, you know, you talk about films like Goodfellas and Casino. That's about gangsters, and usually it's sort of
pulp.
And that's like the crime does not pay kind of theme that goes through those films. Whereas Mean Streets, it's just, you know, it's about this society that lived in this part of Manhattan at this period of time, and some of them were small-time hoods. And some got out of
Harvey
it.
Keitel's character is really, from beginning to end, he's just trying to do the right thing. He's trying to stay true to his girlfriend, and it's very hard. He's trying to stay very loyal to his friends in the neighborhood. And with guys like Johnny Boy, the Robert De Niro character, it's very hard.
Who is really good in this. I mean, Robert De Niro
takes you completely out of left field because he plays such a moron.
And he got the, you know, after this movie, Francis Ford Coppola saw an early cut of the film and saw the performance of De Niro and gave him the role of Vito Corleone in The Godfather 2. So this actually made him a very big star because of this movie. Gave him a big chance, and he got his Oscar for The Godfather 2.
I believe it.
And the thing that I want to mention, too, the most important thing about Mean Streets that I really like, even though, I mean, De Niro, of course, is famous, and Keitel is famous, the supporting cast is not as well known, but I think that's probably the most interesting and best cast Scorsese's ever had. I think David Proval is really interesting as the, I believe, the man, I can't think of his name, Tony, who is the bartender who has a pet lion. He's really good. You've seen him in lots of other
Tiger.
films.
It was
the
a Tiger.
Little Tiger.
Yeah.
Sorry, Little Tiger.
That guy was great. And he had this wonderful sequence with, what's his name? The guy, the fat guy, what's his
George,
name?
well, I was supposed to say, but George Mamoli is another great actor who's in there as Tootie, the fat guy who gets...
They had a great, the great dialogue exchange, which was, you know what? You're a mook. And he goes, what's a mook? I don't know. You can't call me that.
Well, let me finish. I just want to, let me comment and you can cut in. After I just want to tell the actors and then you can comment. George Mamoli, I think, is terrific as Tootie. And then, like you say, David Proval and Richard Romanus.
That's the name I was trying to remember.
Who you might recognize his cousin, who's in Fast Times at Ridgemont High. But he's terrific too as the low-level gangster who makes a deal with Johnny Boy.
But what's great about Mean Streets, which is different than a little bit different from the other gangster films, is that even like a character like Richard Romanus, I mean, he could have been easily set up as the bad guy of the film, so to speak.
He has a legitimate grudge.
But he has a legitimate grudge. And that's the beauty. That's why I don't look at this as a gangster film, because it's not about crime. The focus of the film is just about the relationships of these guys and how they were friends at one moment, how their friendships are just changing because of just the changes that are happening around them.
And that's the most interesting thing I want to mention too about one of the characters. I like they all have little interesting character traits. But the thing about Johnny Boy that I love is that he's not like a bad guy, he's just crazy. He's obviously deranged, you know, like throwing mail bombs and ripping people off.
He's also stupid too. I mean, let's be honest with you. He's not the brightest bulb on the ceiling.
No, he's not. But
he's not. But you know, he's like everyone kind of knows. Like, has had sort of a Johnny Boy type character in their life. You know, this guy that like is only going to do what he wants to do.
Self-destructive.
To the point where it just frustrates, is self-destructive and totally frustrates the crap out of you. And it makes her a very compelling character.
You could see that there was something that they liked about him once, but he changed so much. That's why they're still hanging out with him. But if you knew him today, you would never hang out with him. That's what he basically is. Well, I don't want to go on too long with this, but we can all say Mean Streets is probably the first masterpiece that Scorsese directed, and the one that made him a director to look out for. And in fact, Mean Streets got him his next film, which was Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore. After Ellen Burstyn saw the film and liked it, she went up to Scorsese because she wanted to make a film where a woman was a tough character. And she thought Scorsese could make a tough woman movie, and I guess she could. And the movie is, again, Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore, which stars Ellen Burstyn as a woman who just recently lost her husband and has to restart her life again as a waitress in a small Arizona town and a diner run by Vic Tayback, Kiss Them Grits.
Strangely enough, that's where we get Alice, the TV show.
Yes, which not many people realize, but Martin Scorsese is a big part of that. But Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore, it was a very, I guess to say, one of the most unusual films in his filmography, as it's a really low-key character study.
Well, I mean,
I don't think that's unusual.
I don't think it's, I mean, he made films since then that are more kind of
I think it's just because it's a chick flick. It's told from a woman's point of view, and it's very interesting to see him do that.
Well,
I mean,
but see, I feel with this film, this was also maybe for some of the people who said he could only direct men or mostly male-driven stories. He showed he could direct a female story, and he had a sensitive side. And that's why I consider this film an achievement, because I didn't expect to like it going into it, because I just figured, oh, I don't know, Martin Scorsese, directing a woman's film. But then you watch it, and it's so powerful. And then the thing you'll notice throughout his career, which he doesn't get a lot of credit for, is that he is very good with actresses that everybody always says, oh, but he just makes male-dominated films. But if you watch the films and you see there aren't a lot of females in there, but the females that get center stage in the film usually pull out these powerhouse performances that nobody ever really gives him credit for.
Yeah, you always see a lot of tough women in his movies. I mean, but you don't. I mean, the reason is, but to see them in the lead of the movie is what I
don't think you always see, but in this one specifically, he really puts his money where his mouth is. I mean, it's.
And he respects.
Well, I mean, where I agree with you in that it's unusual in that he has a female lead. Yes, he usually doesn't have female leads in his films. It's usually a male-dominated.
But when you say usually, though,
but what I was going to get at was, like, at that period of time, if you see the kind of films that are coming out of that time, it's not surprising that he made a film like that, because he had a lot of films that were female dominated.
Yeah,
from the Norma Jeans to all this other stuff.
Well, what's to note, Ellen Burstyn actually, well, she won the Academy Award that year for Best Actress. She, I think, in a way, took it from Jenna Rollins, who did Woman Under the Influence, because the two women were.
Well, it's not a bad choice. It's not a bad choice.
She was good. I just think Jenna Rollins was a little bit better.
Was Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore a success, like a financial success? I mean, was it a popular
I think
film?
it was a moderate success for the budget.
It was a pretty big success because it wasn't that expensive, and don't forget it spawned Alice, and you don't spawn a TV show on a flop.
Right.
So.
And it's interesting too that Ellen Burstyn's two boyfriends in the films that we get to see is Harvey Keitel as the very abusive psycho at the beginning, and then you get to see Chris Christopherson at the end. And Chris Christopherson's trying to play this very romantic, tough as nails kind of cowboy, and Ellen Burstyn really resists him a lot. I thought that was interesting because they could have really went for melodrama with that and really made it like, oh, go with the sucker play and the romance. But she really resists him, and the son, Ellen Burstyn's son in the film, he's good too. Matter of fact, she even comments like midway through the movie what a weird kid he is. He's a good actor. And you get a great sense of what this kid's going to be about at the beginning, because you have the lowering of the camera shot that goes into the bedroom, and you hear Mott the Hooples All the Way to Memphis, which is a great song.
Yeah, well,
once again, music.
It's a good movie. Definitely powerhouse performances, and that's one thing I want to say. Chris Christopherson is actually very, very good in the movie.
Yes.
And he actually plays a small part in Scorsese's next film, even though he's not in it. The film is, of course, I would say, the definitive Martin Scorsese film, the film that he's probably most known by, and is probably be his greatest achievement, and that is Taxi Driver, which stars Robert De Niro as a suicidal, I guess not suicidal, a deranged Vietnam veteran who is a taxi driver in New York City. And I can't give an accurate description of the film. It's just a one-of-a-kind film. It was written by a great writer, Paul Schrader. And by the way, since I'm mentioning Paul Schrader, I want to say a little memorial too to his brother, Leonard, who just died the other day.
Well, Leonard helped him write Taxi Driver.
Yes, he did, uncredited. Actually, they wrote the Yakuza first, which got him, known in Hollywood, and got Taxi Driver made. And Taxi Driver was, it's amazing the history of the film. At one time, Neil Diamond was rumored to be in the lead, which I still to this day don't know how anyone could see that happening. Even Mike can't keep a straight face with that one.
Down over it.
By tuberculosis, has it cleared up?
Yes, we got to have the I Am Legend.
I like calling it consumption.
But Taxi Driver, when I saw it many years ago, I didn't realize how crazy Robert De Niro's character in the movie is. That's what I loved about the movie. There's just a scene in there, and it's a very funny movie. There's a scene in there, I just remember he's writing a letter to his mother or whatever, and he's just writing a little thing, oh, by the way, I think I have stomach cancer. And then he just, it's just these very little weird character.
It's a very dark film. And it's a very funny film. It's just the kind of film they wouldn't make today. I mean,
nobody would have the guts.
Not only would they not make it today, it wouldn't get made because you wouldn't get the kind of cast that you got in that film at the time, like Sybil Shepherd,
Albert Brooks,
and Jodie Foster as a child prostitute.
Peter Boyle.
And I think
Peter Boyle is the wizard.
And she was only about 14.
pretty much changed her career. I mean, that role.
Yeah, no, did we mention Harvey Keitel too, I hope?
Yeah,
no, we didn't.
Yeah.
Well, he's in it for like, what, 2
He's not in
minutes?
it very long,
But
but it's a great character.
His role is
it's a very
important.
memorable.
But what's funny is you get to see them act together in Mean Streets, Keitel and De Niro, but it's De Niro that's career just really skyrocketed, where Keitel he had some bit roles here and there, and
it's sad. It's sad, the career trajectory for both of them. I think they should have both went up at the same time, but Keitel's was stable like this.
It took
but
longer
like
for, I think, people to really appreciate Keitel.
But Keitel got offered some really interesting projects at the time, like he did the movie Fingers.
And The Duelist.
And The Duelist, which, you know,
but the
we'll
thing,
talk about later.
He took a lot of interesting offbeat roles. And
he was in Buffalo Bill and the Indians.
I guess you could call
That's right.
I guess you could call him a character, more of a character actor. You know, and De
Niro
is a mainstream character actor. You know, who brought it. But
what was that, Jeff?
Well, he got fired off of Apocalypse Now around that period.
That's right. He played the Martin Sheen role. He was fired after a few days of filming. But another thing I want to mention too in Taxi Driver is the wonderful use of music by Bernard Herrmann, which I believe was his final score before he died.
It was.
And it's probably one of his best and most understated scores. It's a very low key, but it plays perfectly in the drama of the scene. And the slow panning, you know, of the movie, like I just remember with the music, and you see Martin Scorsese sitting on a stoop right behind Sybil Shepherd.
It makes you want to see Scorsese direct a real horror film.
I know, that's the one thing is that he mentions
Because basically this
that.
is his horror film.
It is his horror film.
He shot it, directed it like a horror film. And even though the script is not a horror film script, it's basically what it is.
It's a real life horror.
One of the many highlights of the film is definitely, a lot of times it doesn't work in films, but De Niro's voiceover is wonderful. Wonderful and consistent. And the camera work is always, you know, super top-notch. I mean, I don't know who shot the film, but he was fantastic. And even the Scorsese cameo is just worth it. You know, talking about his wife.
He has two cameos, actually. It's two different characters, which people don't realize. There's a scene where he's behind a stoop, just sitting on a stoop behind Sybil Shepherd when she comes out of the office. And the very interesting thing, which I think you'll love this, Mike, the reason that Scorsese played the role of the man in the back of the cab who was contemplating killing his wife because she was cheating on him was originally supposed to be played by George Famoli,
right,
who
exactly,
was in
Mean Streets.
It was in Mean Streets, Mean Streets. But he made a movie called The Farmer, and he had a really bad accident, and it hurt him. And unfortunately, this accident killed him.
What did he
10
fall
years
off
later.
A horse?
I believe he fell off a horse or something, and it killed him 10 years later.
I think it's also funny that here's obscure facts. He eventually dies from falling off a horse,
1985.
along with Roy Kinnear, who falls off a horse, and he eventually dies from that injury. So you have two big, wonderful, fat character actors fall off horses, and they both die eventually.
And there's another thing very interesting too. Since we're talking trivia, I love trivia. I know you guys do. The Sybil Shepherd works for a candidate, a political candidate with Albert Brooks, and the candidate is named Palpatine, who is also the name of the Emperor in Star Wars, if you might remember.
And they base the character, they base the character of the politician on George Wallace, and the character that De Niro plays, it was supposed to be very influenced by the man that shot George Wallace. I don't know his name, Walter something or other, but I don't know what the assassin's name. But that whole George Wallace being shot, that was influenced the film Taxi Driver.
There's one thing in your court, sir.
Well, there's one thing. We don't have much time on this show. We're going to have to make this show, I think, a three-parter, but I'm enjoying this. The one thing, too, it's sad, is that this movie came into play years later for being famous for being the whole John Lennon / Jodie Foster fiasco.
Robert Reagan.
Hinckley, with John Hinckley, which played later. But as I can see, we're almost out of time. But the John Hinckley thing, and it got an unfair rap, but it's a wonderful film.
I just think that's funny, though, that you got two assassination plots involved with one movie.
Two
Two realistic assassination plots. And neither one of the gentlemen, Ronald Reagan or George Wallace, died from the attempts.
Well, it's a very sick world we live in, but it shows you that there's a lot of characters who really are like Travis Bickle that are out there. Bickle, excuse me. Bickle. Pickle, Brickle, whatever.
Edie Brickell.
But anything else you guys want to comment on Taxi Driver?
It's just a classic.
It is
Good
a classic.
movie.
It's an instant classic.
Well, let's. I think we have time, really briefly, for one more on this one, and we can be very brief on this one. Is New York, New York. What about you, Eric? I have not.
So brief, I haven't seen it.
Very, very quickly, I think it's a fascinating film. I've seen both the director's cut, which has that extended musical sequence. I'm fascinated with the musical genre only as an art form, how it's edited, all that stuff. And I just thought it was interesting seeing Martin Scorsese attempt to sort of do that with this film. Doesn't quite work because on one, you have like two movies. You have this like happy kind of musical thing that's sort of a homage to that period of jazz. Then you have this kitchen sink drama type thing, you know, that's straight out Mean Streets.
We're out of time, as I can see, but I can tell you.
I will add, just before you wrap up.
Liza Minnelli's brilliant in it.
I will add that De Niro and Liza Minnelli have wonderful chemistry in the film.
They do.
They have wonderful chemistry.
I tried to sit through it, but musicals are not for me. Anyway, we'll see you next week with part 2 of the Martin Scorsese Chronicles, and probably followed by the part 3. So until then, thank you and have a good night.
Not a bad thing.